Good evening and welcome to Wisdom Wednesdays. I'm your host and moderator, Carol. And this is our panel. We have Soraya, Selvi, Kamini, Fazana, and Kyra, and we have Amina behind the scenes. So, great show, guys. We had a lot of inquiries as to why we picked this particular subject. And I think this suggests that we will have some honest discourse, and it's interesting to have people not just agree with you, but also disagree with you, or even just ask you, what is it about, so that perhaps they understand better. Well, our subject for today is nurturing the masculine energies in the female, in women. So I want to start, as usual, with a story from my past. I was the coach at one time of the best men's basketball team. And somehow we had to play some matches in Baticalo. And those of you in the basketball scene know, in the sports field know, there was this American Jesuit priest who worked there for several years. I think he came in 1948. And he was there till 1999 when he disappeared along with his driver and was never found. Nobody knew what happened. So we flew down to Baticalo and played the matches, and we came into the final against the Michaelman, that's the Baticalo team, and the whole town just came down there to watch this game. And Father Herbers said at the beginning of the game, he said, it's bad enough women play basketball, and now we have a woman coaching basketball. And I thought, oh my gosh, who is this dude, to call me out, so openly. But anyway, the point of the matter is that we won the game. And at the end, he said, I have to admire this woman. She took on the Michaelman, and, much against the whole town. Suddenly while I was seated on the bench coaching during the game, and I could hear glass break all around us. And I said to the boys on the bench, what's going on? Who's throwing glass at us? And they said, well, it's rotten eggs. And so despite the rotten eggs and despite Father Eber saying, women maybe should not have been seen perhaps, we went on to win the game. And so this is a good start to today's conversation, to bring out the masculine energies in the women. And we will start with none other than Soraya. So Soraya, as you know, is a communication strategist and an interfaith activist. Soraya is going to be talking about navigating the crucial conversations. Soraya, over to you.
Thank you, and good evening to everybody who's listening. And as you might already know, Carol is, of course, an entrepreneur who builds homes for women-led households, and she's a world-renowned sports personality. And thank you, Carol, for that beautiful introduction and getting us on the way. So talking about masculinity and seeing how to bring out the masculinity in the women can be a highly contentious conversation. So I'm going to touch briefly on the crucial role language will play in this conversation if we are going to move forward. So what is the crucial role language plays? It depends on the person who is speaking and the person who is listening. So we have to have a quantitative and a qualitative upgrade of what we are saying. What that means is we have to learn to express ourselves better, and we have to listen empathically. Because this is, look at what Carol shared, just to be called out for wanting to lead, to coach a basketball team. And so this is a pervasive thing. So when we talk about what we are talking about today, many theories come out. Is masculinity a social construct, or is it a biological one? And are women even entitled to be masculine? So oftentimes what happens in our conversations is that we argue the premise. A person comes out with a hypothesis and we continue to argue the hypothesis. So one of the powerful ways in which we can navigate the crucialness and the conflict-ridden conversation is to really acknowledge what the other person is saying. Really acknowledge, so you think this is so, and encourage the person to share. Because what really happens is when somebody does not agree with our value-based conversation, our value-based judgments, what we do is we go into a moralistic judgment of the other person. We classify, we determine, and we quantify the wrongness of the other person. So the point we're trying to make in this show is be patient and listen through, because this is a revolution, a movement that we are building, where we want to say it is okay to advocate for feminist rights. That is, if she is masculine oriented, that is powerful. We need that. And if the man is offended, we have to see why he is offended and engage into a healthy conversation about that. And on that topic, I want to finish by reminding a famous quote by Jiddu Krishnamurti, who, of course, is an Indian philosopher who lived in Southern California for decades and died here. He said something really profound. He said, the highest form of intelligence is to observe without judging. So judgment is an integral part because we belong to dominant cultures. We have been taught how to judge. So with that in mind, let's embark on this interesting conversation and break those barriers and see how women's masculinity is not a threat to anybody, but it is an asset. Thank you, Carla.
Thanks, Soraya. Very, very succinctly put, if I may say so. So now we go on to Selvi. Selvi is the CEO, as you all know, of Purnam Foundation. What you don't...
These energies need to be in balance. And within every human being, masculine or yang energies in women have been suppressed, oppressed, and discriminated and killed over the last 3,500 years. The system of patriarchy that dominated this world systematically killed it. This has given rise, among other things, to toxic masculinity and toxic femininity. Toxic masculinity makes men predatory, the reason for child abuse, selfish, masochistic, and uncaring. The recent Me Too movement destroyed many of these men, and they put them behind bars, like top celebrities like Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby, Sylvester Stallone, and 30 more like them. Now, toxic femininity makes women doormat-like, overly subservient, and they feel a martyr for their fortitude with violence and ill treatment endured. Now, I heard a Sudanese woman saying, if I don't go through the ceremony of genital mutilation, I feel unclean to prepare the meals for my husband. That is how they were made to feel. What the feminist movement over the decade has done is gradually, from the suffragettes, gradually liberate the masculine energies within women. But our journey is not finished as yet. We have people who are working in fields like engineering, space travel, airplane piloting, and so on, and sports like basketball, like putt-shotting. Lots of women have entered these areas which were predominantly male. But we still have not the harmony in society we are hoping. The balance is still skewed because the yin energy in men have not been liberated. Now, that process has to happen. And fortunately, the yin energies to be liberated it doesn't need a suffragette movement. It only needs us as mothers to bring up our sons in such a way that they are made to care for the nature, for the women in the house, for sharing the housework, to do the cooking, do the washing up, and to be part of the household, not people who are thrown out to find their fortunes elsewhere. So I feel that there are lots of men, or maybe a minority of them, who have found that yin energies in them.
Thank you, Carol. Can I be heard?
Yes, you can.
Okay. So this is an extremely important time for humanity. A feminine
as feminine qualities are seeing more praise, this does not mean you should begin to shun or demonize the masculine in an attempt to bring in more power for female energy. So I fully endorse what Selvi said. And remember, this is how society became imbalanced during the rise of the patriarch, because balance is your key to greater health, happiness, deep understanding of your actions and reactions, like Selvi's example of her dad. So I want to take you all through a few experiences where I have experienced a few masculine energies in women, which has helped them cope. You need that. I mean, you can't be the kind of woman that Selvi said that should be a martyr who rejoices in being, sort of being beaten by her husband and thinks it is her duty to wash and clean in the house. The woman also needs to be masculine. If you take even Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, his wife ran her own business. So today they would say, oh, she's having masculine traits, but it was not looked at like that. It was the balance. While he preached religion, she earned. So this masculine and feminine stereotypes have been brought in through times. And if a man cries, he's supposed to be feminine. There's nothing wrong in a man crying. So in my experience, mainly with a few years with UNICEF, soon after the war, I experienced these qualities a lot. And I want to share this to show women that they need these qualities in them to live a challenging life if they're faced with life's challenges, and to face them successfully. Um, Let me start with Manic Farm. So Manic Farm was a place where all the IDPs, the internally displaced persons, were kept for many, many months until their homes were demined, their villages were demined, and they could be resettled soon after the war. So when I went to visit Manic Farm for many projects, mostly whom did I meet? It was women, because the men had been sort of gone missing or died or in action or been lost to the war. So most of the men's husbands, sons or brothers were gone, and here were these women. And my goodness, were they strong. My memory goes back to a girl who had been displaced 4 times and did her A levels from that farm and got into medical college in Jaffna. Now, what do you call that? That is the strength we need in women. And then we go back to when they were sent to their homes. Most of them had to sometimes stay under a tarpaulin close to their home because their home was not fully demined. And this picture has stuck in my mind of a woman with a disabled child and another newborn with her under a simple tarpaulin and still smiling. I had tears in my eyes. She was smiling, she was positive, and she had some of the World Food Program donated food in buckets, which she was going to cook. And I told her, it's about to rain. I can hear the thunder in Tamil. And she said, yes, but it's still better than the lack of shooting in the sky and air raids. So we are still happy to live under a tarpaulin and build our lives again. So this to me is the practical aspect of having those strong, what we in society we call masculine qualities, are not really masculine qualities. It's a quality that even a woman needs to have. It's not owned by a man, because if this woman was very meek and mild and quiet, what would happen to her? What would happen to her children? How would she bring them up? How would she have faced these problems? How would that girl have done her A levels? So as I mentioned above, we have both masculine and feminine energies inside of us. Based on nature and nurture, one of these energies is usually our dominant energy. In order to live a happy and balanced life internally as well as externally, I believe we must bring both of these energies into balance. I call this that winning combination of masculine and winning energy a bingo. It's only then that we're able to live a healthy life and have loving relationships with ourselves and others. This includes both personal and business relationships and affects every area of our lives, from love and romance to career and physical health. Even in my career, most of my career, I've been one of the few women in senior management, and I've got on really well and had felt no discrimination that many talk about, because we were able to blend and no one treated us as a weak, mild female. I was also on par with them. So recently I gave a talk at a large organization for Women's Day, and I asked the audience, how many of you are married? So from an audience of about 300 women, at least half of them were married. And then I asked them, how many of your husbands help you all cook in the morning to, beat the rush? Only 3. So helping your wife cook is not feminine. It will ease so much burden from that woman to, get things ready in the morning amidst all that rush, an extra pair of hands. So these are the things we're trying to share with you today, some of these thoughts. So in conclusion, I want to say that men are not from Mars and women are not from Venus. We're all from planet Earth. Thank you, Karen.
So Fazana, yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, so agree with you on everything you said. I think you all have heard us talk previously when Amina and I used to visit Manik Farm. We saw so much resilience in a lot of the women, because actually, as Fazi said, there were very few men around. And to see these women, work so hard, both physically as well as take on the mental tensions. And the other thing that Fazana said is, she didn't get discriminated against when she was working in the corporate field at a high management level. I think, Fazana, the thing is, I think sometimes we women, we go about at that level, thinking that we are somehow a little bit inferior perhaps, or, what would the men think of us, being in that role. And I think you and I are people, we don't walk like that, right? We think that we are capable, and we believe in that. And that kind of confidence sometimes also doesn't attract any negative energies. I find when you're a bit negative in your thought process, it kind of brings negativity towards you. Kamini would speak more to this particular thing, she always talks about positive energies, etc. So on that note, Kamini, it's your turn now. So Kamini, works on gender-based violence prevention in Sri Lanka and globally. Kamini would be talking to why women who work on gender inequality experience violence. Kamini.
Okay, thanks so much, Carol. So I wanted to talk about this topic because it becomes important when we identify and realize, okay, we do face a lot of backlash when we're doing this kind of work, especially working on gender inequalities. So when women's actions are perceived to challenge patriarchal norms and men's authority over women, these can also be triggers for the perpetration of violence against women and girls. So it can be considered that when a woman is challenging these norms, she's showing strength, she's showing power, she's speaking back, she's questioning. And I wanted to kind of give an example of the dire consequences that some women across the globe also face when they stand up for their own rights. For example, a dear friend of mine in India was telling me about a woman who stood up against some men who urinated against her wall. And when she reported it to the police and started proceedings, these men killed her. And the question is, I mean, it's impossible to think that a person would be killed for that purpose. But when you deconstruct it in those men's eyes, what did she do wrong? She questioned their sense of entitlement and impunity that is so prevalent and so supported through patriarchal society. So for example, if you're working on GBV prevention, gender-based violence prevention as an example, we stand up against gender inequality. We know that GBV is a key barrier to gender equality. So in the process, you are trying to change a deeply entrenched set of norms and behaviors, which have been accepted and internalized into structures, also within men, within women as well. And if we were to look at the basics of gender-based violence, it's actually an act of power. A man who wants to, in this case, if it's violence against women by men, it's about a man who wants to wield his power over someone else with less power using force. It can be emotional, physical, or sexual, or all together. And he's doing this against a person who is powerless as against to his peer or someone he works with. And when you do GBV, you realize that men don't want to be questioned, they don't want to be held accountable, and they feel the shifting of power. And we've noticed in this field of work that there's something that we've labeled, I don't know if many have heard of this, called common resistance reaction. So you can, as a feedback or a response to you talking about preventing gender-based violence or working against gender inequality, you may hear people denying that it is not a problem, it is not something that we should be worried about. I've heard in Sri Lanka people saying, oh no, but in Sri Lanka we had the first female prime minister, but we know that it goes a lot deeper. If you look at a lot of our structures and the GBV rates in Sri Lanka, we know it's an issue. Minimizing, making it smaller than what it really is. Justification, stating that something is right or reasonable. For example, last time I referred to the CARE study, and it talks about how men say a woman deserves to be beaten. Victim blaming, starting to imply that the victim is at fault for the violence that she experienced. For example, once again, the CARE study showed that there were these various rape myths where people believe that the way a woman dresses is why she's experiencing violence. And I've heard certain Sri Lankan politicians say, you know, women have to dress in a particular way if they don't want to, if we want to reduce violence against women in Sri Lanka, which is not the case. It's changing men's behaviors and attitudes. Comparing victimhood, changing the focus of the discussion or situation by stating that another group also experienced the same problem. You will see the undervaluing of us talking about GBV, saying that men also experience violence. And yes, men do experience violence too, but we know that the high proportion of women actually experience violence than men. Remaining silent, choosing to keep quiet or not speak up in the face of the injustice. Or people may try to reinforce these norms that engage, it's a process of engaging in these behaviors that support power inequality and harmful beliefs and attitudes. And you may also find a collusion of men supporting harmful beliefs and attitudes of other men. So, I mean, maybe during the discussion, people may be able to share some of their own experiences, but I just wanted to point out so that it also makes it easier when you're doing this work, what to be ready for and how to you know, deconstruct these conversations and move forward. Again, you see this also when you do women's empowerment programs. We found that when you do women's empowerment programs, men's role as the core breadwinner for the family can shift, and it has led to increases in domestic violence. So when you do programs around women's economic empowerment, you tend to also engage with the partner or the husband in order to reduce the possibility of violence perpetration against that woman. And another place is when women are competing for leadership roles, for example, in politics, elections, women are minimized. In the local government elections that were held 2 years ago, we found so many experiences of women experiencing sexual and gender-based violence. So I just wanted to point out that these are some of the issues. And isn't it interesting? It's when women are trying to move for equality or to earn or to seek to get their voices heard, that these are also a lot of experiences that we can have. And I wanted to leave it there so that maybe we can discuss this further. Thank you.
So, Kamini, you know, what sometimes really bothers me is I often find it's a woman who steps up to support another woman. The woman plays this, you know, if men think that they are supposed to protect a woman and look out for a woman, how come, you know, in cases of violence against women or even just sexist comments against women, that other men don't speak up, that other men don't say, hey guys, what you're doing is wrong. I mean, when, as you said, you know, last, I think, was it the last election or the previous election, when there were some women who ran for politics, you know, whether you agreed with her or not on her different, as you know, ideas against how to do her best, you know, in governance, you may disagree with it, but at least have the respect that you would give someone else. You know, you give that same respect to a woman. And I found that no other men in politics spoke out and said, hey, guys, stop attacking these women. You know, they're daring to come out and play a larger role in helping build society. We have to admire that. So that's another thing that, you know, we have to look at as to why other men, are they threatened? You know, what is it that makes them sort of back off and not say anything? So that's up for further discussion, as Kamini said. And on to Kyra. You know, Kyra works to promote social justice. She's a teacher in meditation and mindfulness. Kyra will talk on how women can access both the feminine and masculine principles in a balanced way. You know, this is from the perspective of a former bhikkhuni. Kyra?
Thank you, Carol. So I was listening to a couples therapist speak recently. His name is Terry Real, and he shared something that I want to share with you because it just, to me, is helpful in this conversation we're having. He was talking about on a kind of continuum of the energy of contempt, which when it directed outwardly towards others, on that side of the spectrum, it's grandiosity. It's thinking that we're better than others. And then when it's directed towards ourselves, inwardly, it's experienced as shame, like we're not good enough. So like the inferiority and superiority complex. And he was saying from his experience working with couples, he's noticed that men tend to lead from a one-up, grandiose position, feeling that better than. I mean, of course, this is from his work with couples therapy, not a general statement, but so men tend to lead from a one-up, grandiose position in relationships and have hidden, there's on the one hand, externally being better than, but then internally having doubts about oneself, which, you know, in all of what we're speaking about with gender-based violence, also any violence that anyone does to anyone, including what men do to women, comes from not feeling okay, not feeling enough in ourselves. If you go deep enough to the root, it's a deep sense of a lack of self-worth. On the other side, Terry Real, this therapist, says, whereas women tend to lead from a one down shame position in relationships and have covert grandiosity. So a secret feeling of, well, I'm actually better than this person, but my way of acting is coming from a less than. And I found this an interesting insight, because on the one hand, I see that both the shame and the grandiosity, they're the shadow side of other qualities that are actually quite positive when they are understood and when they're seen clearly. So the shame, to me, when it's wholesome, is about vulnerability. When we're able to be vulnerable, that's actually a very powerful quality. Then we can really connect. We can connect with ourselves. We can connect with others. The positivity is strength, when we can really claim our real strength. It's not the delusion of our being better than, but it's the feeling of I'm a person that's worthy, right? So both of these tendencies in both men and women can be brought more to a central health point. So curiosity, we're not on the extreme of shame. We're able to be strong and vulnerable at the same time. And so I'll just share from my experience as a nun, as Carol said, as a bhikkhuni also, living with a lot of other women, where our role, I was a nun for 15 years, and our role was not to emphasize, I mean, that path of being a monastic, whether you're a monk or a nun, male or female, is not to emphasize your gender traits. So we shaved our head, both monks and nuns. So that's a very big element of female beauty. We didn't wear colorful clothes. We all wore brown robes that were very hiding our shape. So we were really not identifying ourselves as any kind of object of physical attraction to anyone, or the opposite sex or same sex. So in fact, we worked against the tendencies to show our feminine beauty. It was the opposite. So we had no jewelry, no makeup, you know, and we were actively kind of, all of us, because we were part of a larger collective, the emphasis was on being a cell in a larger body, not standing out and being an individual. Although we did have our individual space to be who we were, and we could bring our talents, singing, giving talks, you know, cooking, all, you know, both monks and nuns. But what I found very freeing in that context of not having to play to the societal roles of what gender was for me, was I found that as women living together, we found a lot of our strength, which you could put in the more masculine side. We were completely independent and able to take care of everything. I fixed cars. I, you know, did carpentry. I cooked. I took care of children in the children's program. I guided people. I taught. You know, I went out teaching into other countries. So I had this role of like the provider in a way, because we go out, you earn donations, you bring it back to the community. I had the role of, you know, I got to play many different nurturing roles, as well as, you know, strong, going out into society, being in the public eye, editing books. I worked on lots of different projects. But what I found as a collective, and for me personally, there was great freedom in not having to play a traditional feminine role of, you know, being a wife to a man, being a mother to children, being objectified sexually by men. And in fact, you know, there was this sense of being somewhat in the middle of both genders. Like, people would often mistake me for a man because I was taller, I had broad shoulders, I had no curves in the monastic dress. And, you know, it was kind of shocking to me because I never was confused as a man before then. But, you know, it also, and it wasn't like I wanted to be masculine or look male, but it was just, there was a sense even from monks that they were sort of blending into this middle where you couldn't quite tell sometimes if they were a man or a woman. And that was kind of freeing to not be caught by all of these roles and expectations. And just, you know, one last thing I'll say is that the monks also, I think, this is my interpretation, they could develop more of their feminine energies also, because they weren't in this very strict role of what it means to be a man. So they could, you know, as meditators, having this very quiet sort of, I mean, it was also very busy because we had many, many visitors coming throughout the year, but they could nurture, they would cook for their guests. You know, we lived separately, so they had their guests, we had ours. They would care for them emotionally. They would have children's programs in their hamlet, so they would take care of the children. So there was this sense of the monks being able to find the inner mother in them of nurturing, and the nuns being able to find the inner father in us as well, where we could be strong, where we could make decisions, where we could say no, we could have, these are the boundaries, we can't do this, you know? So, you know, just this sense of also being able to rely on the collective. And I think, you know, that's something we can each find in ourselves, is this ability to be both and not just one.
So going on from that, Kyra, you know, I want to ask you this question. How can romantic relationships serve or hinder the potential for women to realize their masculine and feminine natures?
So thank you for that question. You know, I think because I've experienced both now, having been in romantic relationships and in monastic life, I find it takes a lot of awareness to not fall into the traditional expectations of gender. And so I think it's really important for both people in a relationship to talk and investigate, what is it that I'm bringing to this connection that is society imposing on me a sense of who I'm supposed to be in this relationship and who you're supposed to be in this relationship as whatever gender we are. And if we don't investigate that, it's so easy to get caught up in unconscious roles where the male identified person may expect the female identified person to do more of the cooking or to do more of the, home cleaning, and the female identified person expects the male identified person to do more of the work in the world or interacting with myself, this sense of kind of losing a little bit of my agency or my sense of independence. And so that's just like something I'm really trying to pay attention to. Like, I haven't figured out the whole thing yet, because it's a whole mantle you take on. When I disrobed and I went back to lay life, it's like whew, this heavy expectation now of gender, now that I'm no longer a celibate nun. And that's something I'm trying to unpeel bit by bit. And I think it's a lot of work, and there's books that are helpful, there's trainings that are helpful. We have to decondition ourselves at a very deep level. And I have to be humble and say, I'm still learning.
I think, Kyra, that's the thing. We have to decondition ourselves. We also have to decondition ourselves on these roles we play, this, whether it's feminine or whether it's masculine. And as someone mentioned here, I mean, it's just human traits, right? It's not a feminine or a masculine, but it's a human trait. On that, Soraya, another thing that actually needs to be changed in our thought processes is the kind of language we used when discussing with males and females having discussions. Can you add some light to this? What kind of language we need to use, mindful of each other's feelings, and not to instigate controversy or not to instigate aggression in each other.
Yeah, so fundamentally, it is our ability not to imply rightness and wrongness in this conversation that is highly critical. Because what happens is we go with a certain perceived notion, and if we are not careful, we can be very aggressive in wanting the other person to agree with us, with our notion. So I think our ability to stay present, and when I said we need to upgrade our communication, I clearly said a qualitative change in how we look at this and how our attitudes towards this conversation has to change. So really speaking, we have to wear this body armor, and we have to, like the Stoics would say, you have to be prepared for the contention. And when you go into the conversation with that preparation, you arrive at a whole different station of resolution, because you are not there to really sell your agenda. And that's not fair by the other person, because we have to acknowledge the difference and the diversity and the dynamism of different opinions. We have to be there. So answering to your question, I think one of the biggest dysfunctional traits of communication is that we think that our notion is right, and that the other person needs to agree. And it is a beautiful place. In fact, with my kids, my son, who is always contentious in his conversations, I always say, I am not attending your party today. So do not accept every invitation that is given to you to an argument. Put a pause and see where the person is coming from, and see whether it is the right time, whether you are in the right frame of mind to enter into this dialogue. Because what happens is we get stuck in the premise. We don't go into the details of the greatness or the merits of the conversation, of the arguments that are presented. So So putting those brakes on, being mindful again. I mean, we started our show with mindfulness, being mindful of what is coming out, what are we receiving, how am I expressing myself, can I hear the other person? If you just focus on that, we will be very successful in how we communicate, hearing the other person. And of course, this is not playing nice. Be honest and express yourself respectfully.
So you know, I think this saying "you" in a conversation, apparently, especially in an argument, doesn't sound right, and it pushes the buttons in each other. So it's very important, the language we use, I suppose. Fazana, is there such a thing called masculine and feminine energies, and is there a balance somewhere we can achieve?
As I mentioned before, the idea of men being masculine and women being feminine needs to be broken. Of course, there are men with masculine energy being their strength and women with feminine energy being their strength, which is the traditional viewpoint, and that still stands. But however, being a feminine man or a masculine woman is not a weakness. So this is where we need to have the balance, because traditionally we had masculine strengths as being focused, logical, stable, goal-oriented, strong, structured, driven, and then feminine energies were looked at as receptive, fluid, allowing, empathic, sensual, emotional, and nurturing. But you can find these same qualities in either or. But this is the balance we need to have. Very often what we find is men sort of resist women, because sometimes I feel women also who have masculine qualities need to, like Soraya rightly said, be aware and sort of be in the moment and have that energy control. If they use it in a negative way to sort of bring it as a negative hit upon men, then you will find there comes a clash. So this is where I think, Carol, that balance has to come. Again, it needs a lot of mindfulness and awareness to have these energies and grow with it. I think if we have a society where all these energies can balance and work together at different points in time, woman can be masculine or feminine at any different point in time. It's her energy, depending on a situation. It's situational. I think the world will be more in a better place, and women and men can be more successful even in relationships and in whatever they do.
I just want
sorry, go ahead.
I just want to add to what Fazana said. One of the least explored avenues for peacemaking and great conversation is language. We go in there with our agenda, and then if we are not mindful, everything crumbles. So we have to remember, when people feel understood, I mean, I know that I feel that when people feel understood, it's easier for them to open up for fresh possibilities. So like, this is the field we are going into needs fresh possibilities, not only from the women, but also from the men. So our ability to pause and understand what the other person is saying is very, very critical.
Actually, what Soraya says is quite right. I mean, Kamini, you were talking about something, how you counteract the experience of violence, sometimes in issues. You want to say more about that, Kamini?
Sure. But first, I also just wanted to point out, I mean, I totally hear what Soraya and Fazana said. It's just that I just want to also acknowledge the frustration you may feel. I mean, as women, when we've gone forward and we've had to have conversations, difficult conversations, especially say on gender-based violence, working with, plantation companies where it's very patriarchal. It's frustrating, or when I've had to work on rugby. And I've noticed, I mean, if it's a tip at all, like, I hold back, and yes, I do the mindful listening, but then I also realize that I have to make the story relevant to that person. And that has been a great way of putting it across. But I also have to really bring down what we would call the masculine trait until I gain their trust, and then I can be forthcoming. That's just been my experience. And yeah, about tools. I was just thinking, I mean, as Carol said, even for me, I've never really felt that in these exceptional, very sensitive conversations, except for those, I've always just spoken my mind, being myself. And I think it has a lot to do with having been accepted by my father and having known that, I didn't feel the difference when communicating with men or women from a very early age. So that was a great strength. And that I feel in a bit of introspection, there can also be a privilege attached to it, because if you're from in Sri Lanka, from a particular school, if you're speaking a particular language, English, for example, you are more heard, you are more accepted. But if you're not, then it can be challenging for women to maintain their ability to push various topics forward, also if they bring in their masculine traits. And I've seen that when I was managing the women's rugby team in Sri Lanka, where a lot of the girls were from very underprivileged societies, communities. They surged on. They had so much power in them. They just surged on. And for them to surge on, what was so important was the support that we gave them. We as individuals, people from positions of privilege, we believed in them. We gave them as much strength and support as possible. So I think it's also very important when women, I've heard some people saying, you should be more feminine or you should be like this. And it frustrates me because at the same time, I will have friends who totally accept me the way I am. And I think it's so important to find your allies or people of the same spirit or same energy. Like, for example, the women on this panel, I'm always inspired every time we leave a call, be it for this or for preparation, right?
Yeah. Sorry, continue. Yeah.
Yeah, just one last thing also, many men have also really supported me in my journey moving forward. So just some points on maybe how to move forward. Yeah.
I think I just wanted to say that, this panel of women, the 7 women, what's unusual is, on a norm, people think that strong women or what they consider to be strong women or strong-minded women or whatever you want to call it with masculine traits or that you wouldn't get on, but we are on in such awe of each other. And what everything that each other has to say is taken so seriously, and we discuss these subjects, right? And there are times we disagree with each other, but we disagree on an equal footing. So that's really very interesting. I just wanted to ask, Selvi was talking about a male that she can refer to who has enhanced feminine traits but who is supportive of women. Selvi?
Thank you.
Okay.
And I'd really like to appreciate what Farzana said, that when the women and men, if they can find the balance between inside them, 1 + 1 is not 2, it becomes 6. When they come together, the relationship and what they can produce between them is immensely greater than what they could do individually. I have got a small minority of men, I think, not I have, but there are some men who found the balance within themselves, were able to espouse the masculine principle in women in their lives. Now, I'd like to mention 2 such women. One is Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was born in the US in 1933. She is one of the 4 female justices ever to be confirmed for the Supreme Court. She had landmark cases which have reflected her lifelong advocacy for gender equality and equal rights. And she ruled same-sex marriage legal in 50 states. Previously, male-only Virginia Military Institute could not deny admission to women based on solely on gender because of her work. Women will have achieved true equality with men. She said, women will have achieved true equality with men if men share with them the responsibility of bringing up the next generation. You see, this was the secret of her success. Her husband, Martin Ginsburg, he was also a famous criminal lawyer. She supported her with cooking and housework while she studied and followed her career. He was a caring father of the 2 children that they had and a proud house husband. He said one day, my wife doesn't give me advice about cooking, and I don't give her advice about law. See, this is how supportive he was. And so Ruth was able to go wherever she went. Anandi Gopal in India, who was born in 1865, is another girl. She was the first female doctor appointed physician in India. Married Gopal Rao when she was 9 and went to live with him when she attained puberty. Her first child died soon after birth. She was really sad and became depressed. And through that depression, she came out to say, I'm going to become a doctor, which was unheard of in her community and even in India those days. Her husband encouraged her, did whatever he could do to make it happen. He stood against the Brahmins who excommunicated him for educating a woman. He found loans to support her. And because the medical college didn't accept her in India, he found money to send her to America to become a doctor.
That's
he was a
fantastic,
great force.
Selvi.
Thank you, Carol.
I'm sorry, we can go on and on with these examples of strong human beings. There's one question I want to ask Kyra before we, my gosh, we're coming to the end of the show. I just want to ask Kyra something. Where was it? So Kyra, yeah, I think I lost. There are certain people who don't want to be identified as male or female or masculine or feminine, where they want to be called transgender. How can we be inclusive of people who are transgender? Very quickly, because we have to move on to the.
Thank you, Carol. Yeah, I feel whenever we talk about male, female, masculine, feminine, we really need to be aware that there is a whole experience in humanity that's been throughout the history of humanity of people who really didn't identify strongly with either masculine or feminine. And in certain indigenous cultures, called two-spirited, they would be the priestesses, the priests, the gatekeepers to other worlds. And in our culture, modern day culture, they're often terribly misunderstood, and often they are the highest victims of violence are transgendered people in the US. I don't know about Sri Lanka, but anyone who is not conforming to the gender that their body, the sexual organs that they were born with, if they don't conform, they become targets. And so it's so important in a conversation like this to be able to see and respect that there is another way besides this duality of male-female, that's a spectrum, and there are people who are totally non-conforming with either or. And I have very good friends who are meditation teachers who hold space for others, and they are transgender. Some were born as men who then have transitioned now and they see themselves more as female. Others may have been born with women's organs, but now they don't feel they want to be called a woman. They don't want to be called a man. They use the pronouns they, their, and them. So whenever I refer to them as they, not he or she. So that's so important to just have that in our awareness, that these aren't the only two polarities that exist. There's a vast range within them.
That's true. We have to remember that, these are just human traits, and we can all absorb the various traits, and that might make us better people, or better able to cope with relationships and each other. On that note, Soraya, your call to action for this week.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you, everybody. So we know today that we don't need strong armies to destroy countries and people. A virus can. This pandemic has taught us powerful lessons. It has brought the best in us when we begin to social distance, not because just we want to be safe, but because we want the other person to be safe. When we move out of our comfort zone and go and feed the hungry and to help the people who are starving, that speaks to the unity that is necessary to sustain any kind of crisis. So the question I want to ask you is, did you see, are you continuing to see any contribution, any challenge to the unity of our nation? This is a foundational flaw that we have, that we need to be more united. So the Wisdom Wednesdays, our final aim is to create a movement of women who will stand up and every day will say, will do, or will talk about national unity in our country. So one of the most powerful agents of change and growth is not going to some school and learning huge techniques, but I say it's a change of heart. And as we move forward, we want women to change their hearts and bring out the more of the masculinity in them. And we want the men to change their hearts and bring out the more, the feminine in them. And when we come together as Sylvie and every one of us shared, the power is immense. It's immeasurable. So our call to action is, as we move forward, stand up for unity. Whatever the energy that you might bring forth, unity, national unity should be paramount in our hearts. Thank you, Carol.
So guys, you know, this week's topic brought in the women, or the feminine in the men, and hopefully some of it was clarified today by the various panelists, you know, who maybe gave you a deeper insight into the subject matter. So now on this is the end of curfew perhaps for all of us. So we've decided that from the next show, we will be going to the 2nd and 4th Wednesdays of the month. Wisdom Wednesdays will be 2nd and 4th Wednesdays of the month at 6 p.m. If you don't catch us live on the show, you can always get us on the Facebook stream. We are on podcast, and hopefully we'll be on Instagram. And YouTube recordings of the show will be on our Wisdom Wednesdays page. So please, this call out is for all the women out there. Please join us in this movement. This is to make even your relationships better, because we are talking about these meaningful subjects that hopefully will develop us more as human beings and have care and empathy and consideration for others. So on that note, goodbye. Thank you very much for joining us every week. So please follow us. Next show.
Could you just say the date so people have the
next show is on the 10th of June. And the following one will be on the 24th of June. Please put it in your diaries. We want more of you to join in. Ask all the questions you want, guys. It doesn't matter how aggressive you will be with your questioning. Just please do that. You know, give us a chance to come out and share with you and debate with you. So on that note, join us next on the 10th of June at 6 p.m. for Wisdom Wednesdays. The same panel will be there, and hopefully will be more charged and have more information to share with you guys. Good night, God bless, and stay safe.